All right, this is a quick little project that I decided I wanted to do in the last few days because we are early in a Pokemon VGC season right now, and I'm seeing a lot of new players, even just in the handful of Discord servers that I'm in that are VGC related and whatnot, who want to get into this game but are finding it kind of complicated, are hitting the same knowledge barriers that many of us hit at some points when we were just getting into it, and are asking a lot of the same questions that can be confusing for new players repeatedly. So I wanted to make a quick little video to try to give an overview, as someone who's been playing VGC for a few years now, of how to get into this game and what exactly goes into that. This is not going to be some high production thing. I'm not too worried about the visuals or anything, basically because I want to get it done quickly while we're still at this timely moment early in the series where there's a lot of new attention on the game. But I do want to be helpful here. I've thought out a lot of the questions that I typically see people asking. That said, while I've written a rough outline for where I want this video to go, I have not written a script. So it is entirely possible that I forget to say something or that I don't think of something in the first place. So if you have any more questions after this, feel free to ask in the comments, and maybe I'll make a follow-up or something, or just type out an answer there. But we're talking about Pokemon VGC here. It is the video game format in the Pokemon Championship series, which spans everything from, grassroots community tournaments where a handful of people get together online to play the game, to the World Championships where, I don't know, hundreds of players, I don't know how many there were this year, but hundreds of players come from all over the world to compete for the highest glory in the Pokemon video game sphere. So there's a lot to cover, but I'll try not to go on too long. First, when we talk about VGC, that does stand for Video Game Championship. That is specifically the video game series. Pokemon Championship events also feature trading card game competition. In fact, those are the ones that get the most attention. Largest player base. I don't play it myself, so I won't try to speak to it. There are also things like Pokemon Go and Pokemon Unite. But we're focused on the video games here. The main series games, currently Scarlet and Violet, are what we're playing in. And if you remember playing the games as a kid, but you're just picking them back up right now, you might be surprised at how much complexity there actually is to them. Some of it has kind of always been there under the surface, but they used to keep a lot of the complexity fairly hidden. And some of it has been added over time, as the series has been running for nearly 30 years now. So, in a Pokemon VGC space, you are always playing double battles, and it is bring 6, pick 4. I think you can bring a minimum of 4 Pokemon to a tournament, but there's not really much reason to bring fewer than 6. But you always bring 4 to the actual battle, and because it's a double battle, you have 2 of them on the field at the same time. And generally, you want those 6 Pokemon to complement each other. You want them to synergize well with each other, but you also want to have specific modes that you can bring, making use of 4 Pokemon to deal with whatever matchup that you're going to run into. Most of what I upload on this channel is that bring 6, pick 4 style of gameplay, so you can watch a lot of my other videos to see how it looks in practice. But let's get an example of a Pokemon in the team builder here. Let's actually choose a VGC format. So I'll get into what these mean in a moment, but I'm just gonna pick Regulation J. That's the main one I'm playing for content right now. VGC is played at level 50. So we'll set our Gengar here to level 50. If you're playing an official tournament on your Scarlet or Violet game cartridge, your Pokemon will be automatically set to level 50 at when you battle. So you don't actually have to have it at level 50 in your game. If my Gengar were actually at level 100, it would be lowered to level 50 when I locked it in to play on the competitive ladder or in a tournament. Or if it were at level 1, I don't think you can have a level 1 Gengar. I don't think that's legal. But if I had like a level 1 Magikarp or something, that would also be automatically scaled up to level 50. So you don't have to worry in official competition about your Pokemon's levels, but if you're playing on something like Pokemon Showdown, you do need to make sure that they're set to level 50. And then, like I said, there's actually a ton of complexity to this game that you might not have known about if you were playing it only as a kid. This is something that I think new players find overwhelming sometimes. They remember sort of a straightforward children's game, and then it turns out there are actually a ton of layers. I'm going to go quickly over some terminology here. So first of all, every Pokemon has 6 stats: HP, attack, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed. HP is, as you can probably guess, it's hit points, how much damage it can take before it's knocked out. Gengar has 135 right now. That's the number of damage it can take. The next 4 stats all factor into damage calculations. So every move in Pokemon is in one of 3 categories. Physical, like Shadow Punch. Special, like Shadow Ball. Or status, like, I don't know, Confuse Ray. This symbol means physical. This symbol means special. This symbol means status. Physical attacks do damage using, most of the time with some rare exceptions, the attacker's attack stat and the target's defense stat to calculate the damage. Special attacks use the attacker's special attack stat and the target's special defense stat, most of the time. Status moves don't do damage directly, or if they do, it's not calculated using stats. Finally, the speed stat, often said to be the most important one. This is the main thing that determines turn order. Speed stat is not everything, but Pokemon is a game, of course, in which the players enter orders simultaneously, and then the Pokemon execute them in an order that is determined somehow. The speed stat is the main part of how it is determined. Faster Pokemon go before slower Pokemon, except in certain circumstances where they don't. But also, moves have different priority values. So higher priority move will go before a lower priority move, independent of the speed stat, but the same priority level. Gengar can't learn Shadow Sneak, unfortunately, but that's a move with +1 priority. Oh, it can't learn Sucker Punch. So you see it says here Sucker Punch usually goes first. That's because its priority value is +1. All these other moves that I put here have priority 0. Most moves in the game do. Some have higher than +1, some have negative priority. Higher priority always goes before lower priority, but when you're at the same priority level, which most moves are, because most moves are at 0, then faster Pokemon goes before slower Pokemon, and that's the importance of the speed stat. Every Pokemon then has some other factors that influence their stats. So one is base stats. You can see all of Gengar's base stats here. It's generally a Pokemon that has high special attack, fairly high speed, not a lot going on in its other stats. That's inherent to its species. But there are also other variables that influence the stats. The first are over here. We call them IVs. I think I'm not sure what the official term is for them now. It might be base points, but maybe that's something else. But IVs, which stands for individual values, is a common fan term that has existed for many years. I don't really know how it arose originally, but when people talk about IVs, this is what they mean. IVs have a value between 0 and 31. So basically a 32-point scale. Every Pokemon has an IV for each one of its stats. There's a judge that you can unlock in the PC. A judge feature. You can look up how to do that. I didn't think to prepare that. That will give you an approximation of your Pokemon's IVs. But mostly it just says things like good or decent, and those correspond to certain values. But generally in competitive play, you want either 0 or 31. The lowest possible stat or the highest possible stat. And in game, that's represented as no good for 0 or best for 31. So that's generally what you're looking for from the IV judge. 31 is the highest a stat can be. That's generally what you want in most of your stats most of the time. There are exceptions where 0 is optimal. Gengar here would probably want to be running an attack IV of 0 most of the time. Not this one because it knows Shadow Punch and Sucker Punch, which are physical attacks. But Gengar is mostly going to be using special attacks, and that means that it doesn't actually use its attack stat for anything. So having a higher attack stat is not valuable to it. And it mostly uses special attacks because its special attack stat is so much higher. But there are a couple of effects in the game that use Gengar's attack stat against it. So if it's confused and it does self-damage in confusion, that uses its attack stat to calculate the damage. And there's an attack called Foul Play, which uses the target's attack stat instead of the user's attack stat to calculate its damage. So on a special attacker like Gengar, you would want your attack IV to be as low as possible. It's not a huge deal. It's kind of an edge case thing to worry about. It's an optimization that I don't even bother with a lot of the time at tournaments, but that is one instance where it's optimal to use an IV of 0. The other more common one is if you're using a Trick Room team. So Trick Room is a field effect that reverses the effect of the speed stat. So there are whole teams built around this. They run slow Pokemon, they set up Trick Room, and then the slow Pokemon go before fast ones. You probably don't want to use Gengar on a Trick Room team, given that it's fast Pokemon, but If you are doing that for some reason, you probably want its speed stat to be as low as possible. So that's the more common case where you would want an IV of 0. There are some really fringe optimizations, like Wolf Glick talks about sometimes in his videos, where you want a value that's not 0 or 31. But most of the time, this is what you want. And I'm not going to get into breeding Pokemon in this video because I don't even really do that for the most part in my games anymore. But if you have a Pokemon with an IV of 0, you can breed it with a Destiny Knot or with the corresponding item to pass down its specific IV. You can look that up and get the IV of 0 on the Pokemon that you hatch. Otherwise, if you just want 31s across the board, there is a feature in the games called Hyper Training. You can use bottle caps, which you can just buy in the games now. I buy them at one of the stores in Cascarafa in Scarlet and Violet. I don't remember which one. Delibird Presents, I think it's called. And you can take them to an NPC in Montenevera near the Pokemon Center, near the Obama Snow, and show them a Pokemon of at least level 50, and you can spend one bottle cap to hyper train one stat, and hyper training automatically sets an IV to 31, whatever it was before. A hyper trained IV cannot be passed down through breeding, but it will max out the stat for that specific Pokemon. There is no way to lower an IV to 0, unfortunately. Fans have been asking for that for a long time, but so far it has not been delivered. The next thing that influences stats is what we call effort values, or EVs. I think these are called stat points officially, but they are a point spread that you can choose to invest onto your Pokemon to increase certain stats. You can see here it says that I have 508 EVs remaining. Technically, you actually get 510 on a Pokemon, but the last two are always useless because EVs only work in multiples of 4 to actually do anything. And 510 is not a multiple of 4. So for whatever reason, that's how it's set up. You only get 508 useful EVs. And the maximum that you can invest in any one stat is 252. In effect, this means that you can maximize EVs in 2 stats and then have one little bit left over for another stat of your choice. Let's say special defense here. This is pretty typical of how a Gengar might look if you want to just be a fast special attacker with it. But of course, you also can distribute the points differently if you want to survive specific hits or do specific damage, or you want to hit a specific speed stat, but you don't need it to go all the way turbo fast. The way EVs work in terms of actually increasing a Pokemon's stats, we can see these are the actual stat values over here. We can see them going up and down as I adjust the EV slider. At level 100, which a lot of unofficial Smogon formats use, it's very simple. It's 4 EVs equals 1 stat point. So we see we get a point for 4 here, another point here, another point here, another point here. But again, VGC is not played at level 100. It's played at level 50. And EVs work somewhat differently at level 50. Instead of being every 4 EVs gives 1 stat point, it's 1 point to the actual value of the stat. I don't want to be too confusing here, given that I'm pretty sure stat points is now the official term for EVs themselves. Instead of every 4 EVs increasing the stat by 1, it's the first 4 increase it by 1, and then every 8 after that. So you see we go 4. So we have 150 special attack, 4 EVs makes it 151. Then we jump to 12 to get 152 and 20 and so on. If I put 16 here, I would be wasting 4 of those points because only 12 of them are actually doing anything. This also means that at level 50, it is always inefficient to invest in an even number of stats. So watch, I'll do this. You can see I have 16 left over for special defense here. 4 of those points are doing nothing. Outside of very rare edge cases where there's really just not much you can do with the points, you always want to invest in an odd number of stats for a VGC Pokemon. So something like this is obviously the most basic kind of spread you can do, but it's very reasonable on a Pokemon like Gengar. But I also, if I wanted, could have something like this. I'm just making numbers up here. I haven't calculated any of this. But generally, you want your EV spread to be invested in either 3 or 5 stats. If I do something like this, once again, I'm wasting points. The last thing that influences a Pokemon's stats is its nature. You can see down here. Ever since Generation 3, every Pokemon has had a nature, like Adamant, Jolly, Serious, Hardy, whatever it might be. Natures are, I think, a 10% adjustment to a Pokemon's stats. Well, there's a really easy way to check. Yep, looks like a 10% to me. And the way it works is every nature increases one stat and decreases another stat. For 5 of them, yeah, I think natures can influence HP, so any of these 5 stats, not HP. For 5 of them, they increase and decrease the same stat, and it nets out to nothing. That's why this hardy nature is not changing Gengar's stats at all. Those are generally not optimal in competitive play. Pretty much any competitive Pokemon you use, outside of really rare cases, has some stats that it values more than others, and so it's beneficial to increase a stat with the cost of lowering another stat being worthwhile. And you can see if you're on Pokemon Showdown like this, you can see what the stats do. Otherwise, you can just look it up in game, or what the natures do, I mean. But some common ones you might see in competitive play include Adamant, which raises attack and lowers special attacks. So on a physical attacker that doesn't use special attacks, don't really care about that. Bold for raising defense. Let's do it this way. If you want to raise attack, you're probably using Adamant or... if you're playing a Trick Room Pokemon, you're using a Brave Nature to lower its speed to make it as slow as possible, right? With that 0 speed IV and everything. Defensive Pokemon, you can go Bold or Impish to boost physical defense, depending on which attacking stat you don't care about. Likewise, Calm or Careful for special defense. On a physical attacker, you're using Adamant to boost his attack, or you're using Jolly to boost his speed, depending on which is more valuable to you, whether you need to outspeed things or hit harder. These are decisions that you make in the builder. Special attacker, modest or timid. So Gengar would probably want to run a timid nature because it's fairly fast, but not crazy fast. And by fully maxing out his speed here, we can get the jump on some opponents, or at least get some good speed ties. I did say earlier, speed is what determines turn order, the main thing. If Pokemon have the same speed value, then it's random which one moves first. So those speed ties can be beneficial sometimes. But that's everything that goes into a Pokemon's stats. Then, of course, Pokemon has an ability to choose from. I chose Gengar because it's my favorite Pokemon. It only gets one ability. But if I put in Pikachu, right, I can choose whether I'm running Static or Lightning Rod. In the actual games, you can use an ability capsule to switch between standard abilities that your Pokemon has. Let's actually pick a Pokemon with 3 abilities. What Pokemon has 3? Most Pokemon have 3 abilities. What's a good example? Alright, Basculegion. You can see these 2 are its 2 standard abilities. You catch a Basculegion in the wild, or a Basculin, and evolve it. It's probably going to have one of these 2. You can use an ability capsule to swap between them. Swift Swim, Adaptability, both very good abilities. But a lot of Pokemon also have what's called a hidden ability, which is sort of a rarer ability that's a little bit harder to unlock. And that's what you use an ability patch for. An ability patch will change a standard ability to a hidden ability, or it'll change a hidden ability back to a standard ability. And abilities have a bunch of different effects. Basculegion, like I said, enjoys Swift Swim if you're running it with the rain weather effect. If it goes turbo fast, and then it goes turbo fast. But if you're not doing that, then you probably want Adaptability because that makes it hit harder. Then, of course, every Pokemon has 4 moves to choose from. I've made some very weird choices on this Gengar right now. A more typical Gengar would probably be running something like Shadow Ball, Sludge Bomb, Dazzling Gleam, and Protect. I've identified Gengar as a Pokemon that probably wants to be a fast special attacker because its stats suit that. And I'm running Shadow Ball and Sludge Bomb because they match Gengar's type. Gengar is a Ghost and Poison type. It benefits from running special attacks of those types. A Pokemon that has... When a Pokemon uses an attack that is the same as that Pokemon's type, it gets a damage... I think a 1.5 damage multiplier on that attack's power. So this Shadow Ball is effectively hitting for 120 power instead of 80. And so that's usually a good starting point if you're using an offensive Pokemon to just pick attacks of the same type that it has, although that depends to an extent on what coverage you need. Speaking of coverage, I have Dazzling Gleam on this Gengar because it's a Fairy type attack. It hits the Dark types that threaten Gengar. And then Protect is just kind of generally one of the best moves in VGC because you can use it. You have 2 Pokemon on the field at the same time. You protect one of them from any damage while you make some kind of play with the other one, switch it, or... make a move to eliminate a threat or something. You can get some better positional play that way. So a lot of Pokemon run Protect in VGC. It's not really mandatory, but you should expect to see it multiple times on pretty much every team you run into. On the other hand, maybe I want to do something a little different with this Gengar, right? Maybe I have other answers to Dark types, and I want to swap in Will-O-Wisp, which burns a target, lowering their attack stat. there are a lot of different options you have, right? One thing that I love about this game is that there are so many different Pokemon and they're so customizable. So we've done stats, abilities, and moves. Pokemon will hold an item then. There are a ton of different held items in the games that have a ton of different effects. This is another thing that you kind of just have to learn as you go. On this Gengar, I might want a Life Orb, which boosts the damage on all of its attacks, 1.3, but cost it some of its HP afterward. You can optimize your HP. It's 1/10 for Life Orb. You can optimize your HP for some of these chip effects. Like if I make its HP end in a 9, then it'll only take functionally 9% damage from the Life Orb. I also could run Choice Specs, which is a bigger boost to its damage, specifically on special attacks, but makes me unable to change moves after I've used it until I switch Gengar out and back in. If I'm doing that, I probably don't want Will-O-Wisp and Protect. I probably want to bring Dazzling Gleam back, and I can still consider Will-O-Wisp. It could be situationally useful, but maybe I want a different attack instead. I don't really know why I would want Thunderbolt, but let's throw that in there. Last thing for a Pokemon is its Tera Type. So this is a unique mechanic in Scarlet and Violet. I don't know how much longer we'll be playing with it for the next little while. I think it will. Terastallization, I think, will exist in Pokemon Champions, which is the next game that we're going to at some unspecified time next year. But I don't know whether it will be legal right away or how often it will be legal. But as it stands right now, if you're familiar with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, you probably know about Terastallization. It's the simplest way to describe it is changing your Pokemon's type. Once per battle transformation that changes your Pokemon's type to any of these types, including Stellar. The way Terastallization actually works in detail is still not super complicated. Defensively, it gives the Pokemon the weaknesses and resistances and other properties of the type that it has, or that it Terastallizes into. So let's say I want to go Tera Electric on this Gengar. Gengar is now defensively an electric type. It is no longer weak to Dark, Ghost, Psychic. It is still weak to Ground, because it's weak to Ground as a poison type, and now it's weak to Ground as an electric type. But that's now its only weakness. And it resists now Electric, Steel. What else does Electric resist? Flying. Instead of the usual set of Gengar resistances. It's no longer immune to Normal and Fighting, because it's now an electric type, not a Ghost type. But it can't be paralyzed as an electric type, because electric types can't be paralyzed. How about that? And offensively, if I have this Tera Electric Gengar, so the way it works is you gain the same type attack bonus, the multiplier I talked about on using attacks of your own type. You now gain that on the type that you've chosen. So Gengar, and that comes without losing the ones that you already have. So even though Gengar is turned into an electric type, it still gets that damage bonus on Shadow Ball and Sludge Bomb that it had before it Terastallized, but now it also gains that on Thunderbolt. And if I Terastallize it to the Ghost type instead, I keep the bonus on Sludge Bomb, I keep the bonus on Shadow Ball, and I stack another bonus on Shadow Ball on top of that. You can double down on the type that you have, and it just gives you a stronger damage multiplier offensively. There's a move called Terra Blast in Scarlet and Violet that most Pokemon get. When a Pokemon is not Terastallized, it's just an 80 base power special normal type attack. When the Pokemon is Terastallized, it takes on the type that they Terastallized into. So here, Terra Blast would be an electric type attack. And it does more... whether it's physical or special depends on which stat of the user is higher. So in Gengar's case, the special attack is higher. It would remain a special attack. But if this were, I don't know, why do I keep thinking of Pokemon that don't exist in Scarlet and Violet? If this were Koraidon, I was going to put in Machamp or Kingler. If this were Koraidon, chances are it would become a physical attack. The only other weird one is the Stellar Tera type. This one works differently. This is a special Tera exclusive type that has all of the properties of all the other types. If you Terastallize into the Stellar type, you get a one-time damage multiplier on any type of move, but it only works the first time you use the move. I think the first time you do damage with it. So Gengar, the first time it clicks Shadow Ball into something, would get the Tera boost on its Ghost type attack, but then the next time it clicked a Ghost type attack, even if it's a different one, like we bring Shadow Punch back, it doesn't get that boost anymore. But if I click Sludge Bomb next, then I get the boost for the poison type Sludge Bomb, I get Fairy for Dazzling Gleam, and so on. And Terra Blast behaves differently if you Terastallize into the Stellar type. I think its base power goes up. It doesn't say so here, but I think that's correct. And it does stellar type damage, which is neutral into every type, but always super effective into terrestrialized Pokemon. And it lowers the user's attack and special attack stats. Tera Blast only does that when it's stellar type. So those are some of the basics of this game in terms of how to build and train a Pokemon. There's obviously a lot that goes into the decisions there, and you want 6 Pokemon that complement each other or whatnot. So this is something you've seen me do many times if you watch this channel. Sometimes I build teams on the fly, like in the ongoing VGC Legends series. You look for certain synergies, like let's say I want to use Miraidon. I might want to pair that with Ice Rider Calyrex because these are 2 very strong offensive Pokemon. One hits on the special side, one on the physical side. They have complementary type coverage. Electric and Ice cover a lot of possible resistances to each other. Miraidon is fast, Calyrex is slow, so I can play a Tailwind game plan using Whimsicott to set Tailwind, which doubles my team's speed. And that's beneficial to Miraidon, sometimes Calyrex. Or I can set Trick Room with Calyrex to reverse that speed order. I can run Farigiraf to also set Trick Room. I can run Iron Hands, which is also slow and so benefits speed-wise from Trick Room. But then Iron Hands is also powered up thanks to its ability by the Electric Terrain that Miraidon sets up with its ability. There are tons of these kinds of synergies you can find in this game, and it can definitely be a little overwhelming at first. I've had Discord conversations with new players who run into a tech they haven't seen before and are just kind of mind blown and don't know how to deal with it. So there's a real learning curve to this game, and if you're just picking it up, you can expect to lose a lot early on, but it's how you learn. There's a ton of information to keep track of. It was relatively easy for me when I started to get into VGC in 2020 because I had been playing Pokemon frequently for many years up to that point. But if you haven't been, you can expect that there's a lot to learn. Another thing to note going into VGC as a new player is that metagames exist. So what I mean by that is there are over 1,000 Pokemon total in the entire series. There are, I think, a few hundred in Scarlet and Violet. And necessarily, some of them are going to be stronger or better suited to deal with the threats that exist in a format than others. So, for example, when I was cooking up some example synergies here, I came up with Miraidon and Ice Rider Calyrex because they are 2 of the strongest Pokemon in the game right now. Miraidon does a ton of electric-type damage with a bunch of multipliers that it can stack onto it. Ice Rider Calyrex can boost its attack stat with this ability that's not super well explained here, but it can boost its attack stat in some ways. And so they are 2 of the very strongest Pokemon in the game. That means some other Pokemon are going to be crowded out because they can't compete with the kind of damage that these Pokemon are able to do. And it also means that these Pokemon are powerful threats that anyone else in the metagame needs to be able to answer. You need reliable ways to beat these Pokemon if you're going to do well in the format. That means that necessarily some Pokemon are going to be used more than others because they are the best suited to deal with the top threats in the game, or they are among those top threats themselves. You hear a lot about Incineroar in competitive play. Incineroar has a ton of tools to support its teammates, so it can play a lot of different roles that a lot of Pokemon can't. Metagames shift over time. People are always innovating, trying to find new ways to beat the top threats, so you can't just assume that something you've learned is strong at one point will continue to be strong and very powerful later. But also, they are largely tied to the inherent properties of a Pokemon. A Pokemon will do well in a metagame if it has just the right combination of stats, ability, type, powerful moves to excel. And there's nothing wrong with playing off-meta teams. I play a lot of off-meta teams. There's nothing wrong with getting creative. There's nothing wrong with building around one of your favorite Pokemon. But if you're trying to win at the highest levels, realistically, you have to at least respect the metagame and know how to deal with it. And very often that means participating in it to an extent yourself. It's okay if that's not your primary goal. But if that is your primary goal, that's what it looks like. And if you go into a VGC Discord or something like that, you're going to run into a lot of people who assume that your primary goal is to try to compete at a high level and win as much as you can, because that's what most players are trying to do. So if you have a different goal in mind and you're trying to just build around your favorite Pokemon or something, by all means do that. I am not trying to discourage it, but be clear about what your intentions are, and you'll get better advice that way. The other thing about metagames always shifting is that these days we have rotating formats. The format changes every few months. And by the format, I mean what Pokemon are legal and any other rules tacked onto that. So this is this list here. And this has been confusing to people lately because for the first time in Scarlet and Violet, we actually have 2 formats running at the same time right now, which I've seen mix a lot of people up. Quick history of Scarlet and Violet formats. Regulation A allowed only Pokemon in the Paldea Pokedex and not any of the following categories: Legendary Pokemon, Mythical Pokemon, and Paradox Pokemon. All of these were banned. I actually meant to get Iron Bundle. I don't know how I mistyped that. All of these were banned in Regulation A, as well as any Pokemon that were not in the Paldea Pokedex. Regulation B allowed Paradox Pokemon. Regulation C allowed some Legendary Pokemon. There's a distinction. I should have pulled up a page on this. There's a distinction between Legendary Pokemon generally and Legendary Pokemon that are restricted. Restricted Pokemon, you can look up a list of them, but they're basically your box art big ticket legendaries like Lugia, Ho-Oh, Kyogre, Miraidon, Mewtwo, even though it's not on any box art, is restricted. Suicune, even though it is on a box art, is not restricted, but a lot of this is pretty intuitive. Maybe some of the weirdest cases are like Cosmog and Cosmoem being restricted. Regulation C allowed unrestricted legendaries, but not restricted ones. Regulation D open up the Pokedex to, or open up the format to all Pokemon that were in the game, whether they were in the Paldea Pokedex or not. Regulation E added Pokemon from the Teal Mask expansion. Regulation F added Pokemon from the Indigo Disc expansion. Regulation G allowed 1 restricted legendary per team. Regulation H rebanned all legendary and Paradox Pokemon, while keeping all other Pokemon that are allowed in the game, or that exist in the game, allowed. Regulation I allowed 2 restricted legendaries per team, as well as bringing all these back. And Regulation J has now added mythical Pokemon to the available pool as restricted Pokemon. The current format, the format changes roughly every 3 or 4 months. And format changes are always announced a month in advance, which I've actually seen confuse a lot of people lately. They always announce a new format, almost always, 1 month before it officially starts, which means people will be playing it on Showdown as soon as they know what it is, because they want to get some practice. But you can't actually play it on the official game cartridge ladder or in official tournaments until it officially starts a month later. So, for example, Regulation J was announced at the beginning of August. People were playing it on Showdown from pretty much August 1st, but it only became legal in the actual games, on the actual game ladder, this month, September. I've seen that mix a lot of people up. It pretty much always works like that. What is confusing is that, like I said, right now we have 2 formats running at the same time. If you're playing an official tournament, the current format is Regulation H, which allows all Pokemon that exist in Scarlet and Violet, except it does not allow any legendary Pokemon. We can see Tinglu is banned, so is Giratina. It does not allow Paradox Pokemon, and it does not allow mythical Pokemon. If you're going to an official tournament, this is the format right now. Or you're playing in an official challenge, which we'll talk about in a second. If you're just playing the ladder, like regular ranked battles in-game, the current format is Regulation J, which allows legendary Pokemon, Paradox Pokemon, up to 2 restricted Pokemon per team, and mythical Pokemon count as restricted. So you still can't have Miraidon, Koraidon, and Terapagos all on the same team, but you can have 2 of those, or you can have Miraidon and Arceus, or what have you. One format for ranked battles, another format for tournaments. My guess as to why they did this is that they wanted to have a mythical format of some kind so that we would get some chance to use mythical Pokemon. They also did one at the end of Sword and Shield that was not used for any official tournaments except I think one in Taiwan. But they recognized that it would be a bad tournament format because mythical Pokemon are often very weird and unbalanced. But that is the situation right now. We will get another format in, I think, approximately December. We don't yet know what it will be. It will probably be announced a month in advance. The popular guess right now is a second round of Regulation I. So the same as Regulation J, but with mythical Pokemon banned. That was the format that just happened for Worlds. But we don't actually know. And then sometime after that, we'll move to Pokemon Champions, and who knows what happens. They have told us that Mega Evolution will exist. Right. Now, how do you actually play this game? I've talked already about what I call the cartridge ladder. I should say ranked battles. This is ranked battles in the battle stadium in-game. I don't have a capture card, so I don't have a demonstration of this. But if you've ever gone to the battle stadium in your Scarlet and Violet game, you probably know what I'm talking about. Casual battles are where you can bring anything you want. Ranked battles are basically VGC style. That's a good way to get into the game right now. And you don't need to build your own team. You can use a rental code. There are a number of ways to find rental codes online. I should have set this up earlier. YouTubers will sometimes show rental teams on in their videos, and you can see the rental code there and rent the team yourself. There's also a large repository here called VGCPastes. I'm on their Twitter page, even though I don't have a Twitter account, because this is just the easiest way to find. I just Googled VGCPastes to find this, and I can't read their stuff reliably, but you just click on this, and it takes me to the spreadsheet. I don't know how much of this is actually showing in the OBS scene right now. Okay, there are tabs at the bottom where you can sort by format. I'm on the Regulation J one right now, so I'm looking at Regulation J teams. If there's a rental code, they will share it over here. Looks like there are rental codes for a lot of these. We've got Regulation H over here. Not so many rental codes here, but there are some. And they just compile information, so you can get teams from all over the place from that spreadsheet. Or you can find them in a YouTube video or on social media or something. So you don't have to build your own team. This Gengar demonstration was pretty complicated, I'm well aware, and it can be very difficult to find out the synergies, what kinds of pieces with a team complement each other. It is actually very... So something people often ask when they're new is, should I build my own teams or should I use rentals? And it is very common advice to say that you should not build your own teams when you're new to the game. You should play a lot of games with rentals first, and then start building afterward. That is not advice that I personally give very often, even though I think it actually probably is good advice if your goal is just to pick up the game as quickly as you can, learn the different tactics, the different synergies and strategies, and get good at it. The reason I'm not personally big on that advice is that it would never have worked for me when I was a new player. For me, a lot of the fun of the game is in building. Some people don't feel that way, right? Some people just want to get to the point where they're piloting the team in battle, trying to make the best decisions they can with the tools that they have. Some competitive Pokemon players never really learn how to build well. But for me, a lot of what's appealing about the game is having all of these different available, highly customizable pieces and putting them together in interesting combinations. So when I was a new player, would have felt like I wasn't properly playing the game if I didn't build my own teams. And so I would never have listened to that standard advice, and I did just try to build my own teams early on. I did eventually get comfortable using rentals over time, and a big part of what shifted in my mindset was the realization that if there's a particular strategy that I'm working on, often someone will have already developed it better than I'm about to, and I'm just artificially weakening my own build if I don't allow myself to at least take heavy inspiration from someone else's work. But that said, what I think you should actually do as a new player is whatever is best and most enjoyable for you. I think ultimately you're never going to get good at this game if you don't enjoy it, and it's not going to be worthwhile if you don't enjoy it. So you should do whatever is best for you. If you don't care about what I just talked about feeling like I was kind of cheating myself if I didn't also build my teams, then by all means use rentals. That probably is genuinely the better way to improve. It's standard advice for a reason. But if you don't like the idea of using rentals and you're wedded to the idea of building your own teams, some people would tell you that you shouldn't do that. But if that's how you feel, I think that's valid. That's how I felt when I was a new player. By all means, do what you want. That said, that is my answer to the question, should you use rental teams instead of building your own? Do whatever is best for your enjoyment of this game. But the standard advice is the standard advice for a reason, but it's not, the end all be all. Now, that's whether you're building your own team or you are using a rental. That's how you can get onto ranked battles and compete there. But what about tournaments? Maybe you want to compete for prizes. Maybe you want to match up with the best of the best. Maybe you just when the formats are split right now, you just really don't like Regulation J and you want to play Regulation H, because they're very different vibes and a lot of people have strong preferences in terms of which one they prefer. Regulation J being centered on very powerful restricted Pokemon, and Regulation H being somewhat flatter, with teams having to work together as a unit to do damage more. That is something very common, by the way. Different formats can play very differently, and some people will... Personally, I haven't seen a format in Scarlet and Violet that I didn't like, but some people will really love one format and really not love another format. And if that happens to you, that is fine and normal. But official tournaments. And the first thing that I see very often from new people is that they think they're not ready for official tournaments. And they think that it's something they aspire to do someday, but they want to work on the game first. Once again, if that's how you feel, I'm not going to say that you're wrong. I think if you're a brand new player and you don't know the basic strategies of the game and whatnot, it does make a lot of sense to grab a rental team and just play a bunch of games and see what kinds of sets, what kinds of opponents you lose to and what they're doing. I think that's totally fine. All that said, I think if you're ever wondering, is it time, am I ready to start playing tournaments? The answer is almost certainly yes. Like maybe if you've just picked up the game for the first time ever, you want to get some experience first, I can understand that. But my answer to are you ready to play tournaments is I honestly say just go for it. You might lose a lot if you go to a major tournament and you're new to the game, but like I've been at a regional tournament sitting at the low ranked tables facing players who lost like 3/4 of their games, and some of them were still having a ton of fun. It's a great experience if you enjoy Pokemon to go and play it in person with a bunch of like-minded people. And you can learn a lot from the experience. So I'm not a big believer that there's such a thing as a player who is not good enough to go and compete in tournaments. Major tournaments draw players of all skill levels. And like I said, I've seen players from the high tables all the way down to the low ones have a lot of fun throughout. So I am all for going and competing if it's of any interest to you. The competitive season runs typically from September to August. There can be some variation here. For example, when Scarlet and Violet were coming out in the fall of 2022, there were no video game official major tournaments, I think from like September to December that year. I think they started again in January, if I remember correctly. But usually the season ends with the World Championships sometime in August, and it resumes, or the next one starts rather, in September. So we're at the early end of the season right now. If you want to compete in the competitive circuit, what have I done with some of these tabs? I have too many open. The first thing you need is a Pokemon Trainer Club account. So I'm on Pokemon.com right here, the basic Pokemon webpage. Click on this. I'm not going to log into my Trainer Club account on video, but you can create an account here and fill out your basic information, and it will give you a trainer ID number. You will be able to pair your account to your games, and you will be able to earn championship points, which are the points used to qualify for Worlds. I think you do need an account to go and attend a major tournament, like a regional. For something like on an in-game challenge, you don't need one, but you don't get points. You can't really earn the main perk of playing if you don't have an account. So definitely make an account if you don't have one. And then it's a matter of finding events to go to. This is the Play Pokemon event locator. I got here by Googling Play Pokemon event locator. I don't actually know. I guess events.pokemon.com would get me there. This is where you can find local level tournaments. There are, in some areas, a lot of them. There are, in some areas, none of them. There are no locals in my province or anywhere nearby that I can find, so I don't actually have experience going to locals. I can't really speak to what they're like. But basically, you go to a store. I think they have to be run from trading card shops now. And it's just, as the name suggests, a small localized tournament where you can play with players probably mostly in your local area and maybe earn some championship points if you do well. A lot of top players get a lot of their points from locals, I gather. Locals are, in my understanding, a good way to sort of get involved in the community for Pokemon, because you're playing frequent tournaments with frequent small scale tournaments with largely a lot of the same people. You can sort of talk and get to know people. I think a lot of local communities sort of help each other build teams over time for the bigger events. And like I said, this event locator is where you find them. I'm going to pretend that I live in Toronto, which I have at many times in my life. I don't right now. But if I put in Toronto here, you can see there are locals all over at various stores. I could go to, let's say, 401 Games. On Yonge Street, yep. And, oh, there's something on September 12th. Oh, it's trading card game only. I could swear 401 Games does have video game locals. The 12th is Saturday, right? I should be able to filter. You can tell I don't use this often. I should be able to filter what kind of game I'm looking for, right? Yeah, so I clicked on the options tab here. Let's say video games. Cup and challenge are just different kinds of local tournaments. I think a cup is worth more championship points. Now, 401 Games is not showing up at the top anymore, but we've got Banana Games and Hobbies here. There you go. If you're in Toronto, you can go to Yonge and Gerrard for that. No locals in my area, unfortunately, so I don't know the experience that well. But going off of what I've heard from other people, they sound like a fun time. But, of course, locals are not all there is to official competition. Oh, I should also say there's an app now, a new app called Play Pokemon Access. And I think you can use the event locator there and also see a list of official tournaments and so on. I have installed the app, but I haven't done much with it yet because there's not much for me to do yet. But definitely check that out if you're interested in competitive play. I'm not super knowledgeable about it myself yet, though. Yeah. But let's suppose you want to go bigger than locals. You want to play in major tournaments, which, again, I do think is a good idea. They're basically like big Pokemon conventions where you also get to have fun competing. And depending on where you go, maybe you get to travel to somewhere you haven't been before. I've gone to a few tournaments in places that I might never have gone to otherwise. So you get to see a little bit of another area and so on. I've found some nice brew pubs in other cities and whatnot. So the first thing is to know the schedule for major events. First of all, there is a split for official events, major tournaments, between the Pokemon Company and the Pokemon Company International. Basically, the key thing to know here is that events in East and Southeast Asia work very differently from how they work in the rest of the world. If you hear about like a Premier Ball League or a Master Ball League, those are Asian events. I'm not knowledgeable about how they work. I'm not in Asia. But if you're in North America, Europe, any of the regions outside of those areas, you play tournaments under the umbrella of the Pokemon Company International. Pokemon Company International runs tournaments in 5 regions right now: North America, Europe, Latin America, Oceania, and the combined region of the Middle East and South Africa. What country you're in determines what region you're in. The North America is the US and Canada. If you're in Mexico, you're a Latin America player. And all of those have some number of major tournaments over the course of the season. I personally use Victory Road, this website here, to keep track of what events are coming up when. You can click on the 2026 season here. I think the event calendar link here still links to the 2025 season. At least it did last I checked. But so I clicked on 2026 season, and I have a list of all of the major events. See, here are a bunch of Asian national championships. But I have a bunch of events for other places coming up. We got North America, we got Europe, Latin America, and so on. Most of these major tournaments are what are called regional championships or special events. These are basically the same thing. The only difference is that a special event has no fee to enter and no prize money. And they're run that way because some countries have gambling laws that don't allow for winning money on competitive Pokemon. Pokemon is a heavily skill-based game, but it also has a significant luck component. So, it makes sense to me that some countries' gambling laws would take a dimmer view of that than others. But otherwise, a regional and a special event are the same thing. And a regional is one of those big tournaments you'll often hear about where hundreds of players gather in one place for a larger scale competition in a convention center with larger championship points, payouts, and monetary prizes if it's a regional and not a special event. They happen usually several times in each region. If it's a smaller region like Oceania, not that many. Middle East and South Africa have none announced so far for this season. I think you can also see the schedule here, right? Yeah, so there's a list here that's nice and chronological. That's actually very useful. I personally am just used to using the Victory Road one, but maybe I should use this one. And so scrolling through this, I can see the next one that might be of any interest to me is the Toronto Regional in January. But if you're in Europe, maybe you want to go to Frankfurt or Lille or Gdansk. If you're in Australia, we've got Brisbane here. If you're in Mexico or not too far from Mexico, Monterrey, etc. You can go to a regional. If you're a player from any of the 5 regions I listed, you can go to a regional anywhere. There's no rule against it. I could go to a regional in Mexico or in Europe if I wanted and had the money and time for it. There's no requirement that you live nearby or anything like that. But, you know, it's significant travel. I mean, coming from where I am, it's significant cost and travel time regardless. So I do try to target somewhere relatively close to me. But you can make your own choices there. The basic structure of a regional, so like I said, it's all in one convention center. The whole competition is there. It runs over a weekend. The way a regional works is, first of all, signups open usually about 7 weeks before the event. It can vary, but like 1 to 2 months, usually about 7 weeks. It will be announced ahead of time. So if you're interested in a particular regional, you should keep an eye out for any announcements about when that's going to open. But it's usually about 7 weeks beforehand, and regionals can sell out very quickly. If you are looking to compete in a regional, and this is at all possible for you, it is best that you be ready the moment signups open. They don't always sell out, but sometimes they do. And if you miss out, you're probably out of luck, even if they sell out weeks before the thing opens. I very often see players asking about signups for a regional where signups opened a while ago and are now sold out. What was that? What else was I going to say about that? Hang on. Here's the problem with not writing a script. Oh, right, yeah. So whether a regional is likely to sell out, if you want to hedge on that, depends on a couple of factors. From what I've seen, they sell out more often early in the season when a lot of players are gunning for Worlds invites, and they sell out more often in areas with or near a large player base. So, for example, a regional in the American South, I would consider more likely to sell out than one in the American Pacific Northwest. But personally, I'm a cautious guy. I try to be ready at the exact moment they open if I possibly can. You sign up through here. Play Pokemon Access might change this. I don't really know. But you sign up through this website, rk9.gg. Once again, I'm not going to log into my account right now on video, but you get a player dashboard in there, and it's pretty easy and straightforward to use this site to sign up. Doesn't look like it's working terribly well right now. I should be able to pull up a list of upcoming events or recent and current events. I don't know why it's not loading right now, but this is not normal for this site in my experience. They are sometimes experimenting with other ways to sign up, so be alert. Okay, it was just slow. You can see Frankfurt here, Monterrey. They have the different games, trading card game and Go as well. This site is also where you'll see the live roster and the pairings once those things are up as the tournament is going on. It is what was I going to say? They are experimenting with other ways of doing signups sometimes, so keep an eye on the specific details of a signup announcement, but usually at least part of it runs through this site. And then the pairings are here. I think Play Pokemon Access will give you pairings in the app, though. But again, I haven't had an opportunity to use that app yet for anything notable. Also, a lot of details might change when we're on Pokemon Champions, which again will be at a not yet specified time next year. Once you have signed up for a regional and made whatever travel arrangements you have to make, you have to submit a team sheet. You have to submit a list of the Pokemon that you are using in the tournament. What that looks like. You will enter each of your Pokemon. You will enter, I think, the level that it's at in game. I think it asks for that. You will enter your Pokemon's Tera Type, item, ability, moves. All of those for each of your Pokemon. For the stats, it will ask for the stats. You enter the actual values of the stats in your game. You do not enter your EVs. You do not enter your IVs. None of that. You enter the actual stats displayed at the level that your Pokemon is actually at in the game. So let's say I've trained my Gengar to level 63. It'll be automatically scaled to level 50 in actual battles, but it still shows up in my box in game at level 63. Let's say I've maxed out its speed stat like we talked about earlier. Okay, that doesn't work so well at level 63. Let's say I've put 252 special attack EVs in, but I have a nature that doesn't affect its special attack stat. You can see here the Gengar, if I've trained it correctly, will have 228 special attack at level 63. This is the number that will show up in my box. This is the number that you enter for the stat value into Arcanine when you're submitting your team sheet. You do that for all 6 of your Pokemon. You group them together into a team. You submit. Team sheet submissions, they usually open like a few days before the event, and I think they close an hour before battles start. So you have plenty of time to do it, and you can go back and make changes. If you change your mind about something, you can resubmit a different team sheet. The last one you submitted will go through. For the actual timing of the event, you probably want to arrive on the Friday. There are no battles on the Friday, but usually you can go into the venue and pick up your badge, get checked in. This is something I like to do because battles tend to start fairly early Saturday morning. You can check in Saturday morning, but I would prefer not to do that if I don't have to. I find it better to get there on Friday, scope things out. You will need your player ID that you were given with your Pokemon Trainer Club account. My first time going to a regional, I didn't know that I was going to need to give my player ID at check-in, and the person checking me in was annoyed that I didn't have it ready to go. I still have never memorized my player ID. I just make sure I have a written record of it handy when I go to check in for an event. But it's a pretty short number. You can memorize it. I don't know why I never have. But make sure you have it ready. You may also need to show government ID, like a driver's license or something, to prove that you are who you say you are. You can check in on Friday. You also can check in on Saturday. I would rather do it on Friday. Battles start on Saturday. There are however many rounds there are. There were 8 rounds on day 1 this past season, so on Saturday. I think they might have changed the number again, but I don't remember for sure. But you will just keep playing those rounds until the day is over, or you drop out if you want. I've never dropped early from an event, even if I was doing badly. My thinking is always, I've traveled a long way to play this game, not to not play this game. But, once again, that's your own choice, up to you. Sometimes you'll get downtime between rounds. Sometimes not very much of that, depending on how quickly you finish playing. Rounds in a regional are best of 3, and the maximum time for a battle, according to the in-game timer, is 20 minutes. So you can expect a round to typically take about an hour. There's pretty much always someone who uses the full time, but it doesn't hurt to have a snack handy or something like that. Make sure you can keep yourself going throughout the day. It is a tiring day playing like 8 or 9 rounds of Pokemon in one go. I find that I often get very, very tired starting around round 6. It has gotten better as I've gone to more tournaments, but that is something to keep in mind. I would recommend being well rested, having a snack, and so on. The way the rounds work, it is a Swiss bracket format. What that means is each round of the tournament, you are paired against someone who has the same record as you, if at all possible. If you can have odd numbers where not all the matchups can quite be that. Maybe somebody is up paired to one win better than them, or down paired. But for the most part, let's say you're 4 rounds in and you've gone 2-2. Most likely your opponent will also be 2-2. And it's like that through all 8 or 9 or however many rounds. Generally, you have to get through all of that with 2 losses or fewer to make it to the day 2 rounds. I have never done this. My best result at a regional so far is in Toronto last year, 5-3 on day 1. So if I had turned one more of those losses into a win, I would have gotten to day 2. But I didn't, and my tournament was over on day 1. I think it was in round 6 that I was eliminated from contention. So if you are someone who wants to drop once you're no longer in contention to win the whole thing, if I were that kind of person, that's where I would have. I played out my last 2 rounds anyway. It can also just be plain worthwhile to play out your last 2 rounds, right? Like if I finish my tournament at 3-3, I'm a lot further down in the standings than I am finishing it at 5-3, and I got championship points from that tournament. Depending on how many players there are in the tournament, there might be quite a few who miss day 2 but still do relatively well for day 1, and they get championship points from it. So in that position, I think it's definitely the right call to play it out. But there are a lot of very good players who, will have kind of a rough start to the day. They'll go 1-3 or something, and they'll drop right there. I think that's also best finish limits coming into play. Like there's a limit to how many events you can of the same type you can get points for. I don't know what the best finish limits are. They're weirdly hard to look up, but only your best N regionals actually count for points. So if you know already that it's not going to be one of your best, then you can't get points even if you do well. But I only went to 1 regional all of last season, so I didn't have to worry about that. And like I said, personally, I don't drop early because I enjoy playing the game, and that's what I've traveled there to do. But in any case, you have those rounds day 1, 2 losses or fewer, you advance to day 2, and then you show up on the Sunday, you play a few more rounds of Swiss. How many depends on the number of players, and then it goes to a top cut bracket, which is the knockout bracket for the top however many players remaining at the end of Swiss. The way they did it last season, I'm not sure whether they've changed it for this season. The way they did it last season was top 8. I think if I remember right, it was top 8, and then everyone else who had the same record as number 8. And that worked out to a lot more than 8 a lot of the time, but that was how they generated their knockout bracket. Then prizes are given out on Sunday, and off people go. Many people fly out Sunday evening, even if it means they miss finals. When I go to a regional, I often see people with their bags ready to go at the venue on the Sunday. I personally have not ever done this. I generally book my return flight on the Monday, even though I've never even made a day 2. Personally, I always go to a tournament humoring the idea that maybe somehow everything breaks just right and I actually win the whole thing. I don't think I would want to go to a tournament not imagining that could conceivably somehow happen, but once again, your mileage may vary. A lot of people book the return flight on Sunday, and then even if they do make the final and they miss it, the prize money can usually more than make up for that. Personally, I don't leave before Monday, or at least I haven't so far when I've gone to events. That's a decision you can make for yourself. Just be aware, it does tend to wrap up around early Sunday evening. Depending on when your flight is, you might miss finals. And even if you don't make finals, that can be fun to watch in person. There also often are side events at tournaments, little side tournaments with silly formats and stuff. I definitely recommend checking those out. Those are a lot of fun. They also sometimes do local level tournaments at the venue at regionals. That's the only kind of local I have ever played. I've done pretty well in a couple of them. So more opportunities to play Pokemon on both the Friday and the Sunday. Keep your eyes peeled for those for sure if you go. That's how a regional works. Now, what's even bigger than a regional is an international championship. These are the largest open entry events in the Western Circuit. There is no qualifying process for an international championship, just like there isn't for a regional. I never said that explicitly, but yeah, you can just sign up for a regional and an international. That said, internationals get a ton of interest from the broader player base, and they fill up very quickly. So for these, you really do need to be ready to sign up when sign-up's open. And even then, there's some luck involved. But I think an international championship is well worth it. I talked about Pokemon events being like big conventions. Much more than regionals. These are huge Pokemon conventions with tournaments tacked onto them. You'll see Pokemon fans from all over the place engaging with the game in a lot of different ways. There's usually a pop-up Pokemon Center store, at least in Europe and North America. I don't know for sure about the Latin America one. And yeah, just a ton of fans sending in one place, having a lot of fun interacting, and you get to play an even bigger tournament with bigger points payouts and usually a larger and stronger player field than a regional. So regional is a great experience, but an international championship really is that next level. And if you can make it to one, I certainly recommend it. I have gone to the North America International Championship twice. I don't know if or when I will again for reasons unrelated to Pokemon. I certainly miss going. Might try to go to the Europe one sometime. Once again, you are not locked to your own region for international championships. Very often you'll hear about one of these being won by an out-of-region player. For example, Wolfglick has a recent video about winning the Europe International Championship, even though he's American. That's completely fine. Completely within the rules for how these things work. There are only 3 international championships right now. There used to be an Oceania one, which generally was held in Australia, probably always in Australia, but they recently stopped doing that one. I don't know whether it will ever come back, but there's always Latin America International. I can't think of a time that it wasn't in Brazil, but I haven't been playing super long. It seems to at least usually be in Brazil. A Europe International, typically in London or Germany, and then a North America International. And again, you can enter this no matter who you are, no matter what caliber of player you are. It is somewhat more competitive than a regional. I can understand a little bit more being nervous if you're new to the game, but I definitely recommend it. My second ever event was an international, and I mean, I loved it, and I wanted to keep going back, so definitely well worthwhile. And then, of course, there's the World Championships. This is the biggest event. This is the only one for which you do have to qualify to compete. I've been talking about championship points throughout. If you're in a Pokemon Company International region, any of the 5 that I listed earlier. I don't know how qualifying works right now. I'm not trying to qualify. Last season, it was the top N players within a particular region, where N differed by region. I think it was top 75 in North America and Europe, and lower in some other regions, by championship points. So you had to accumulate a lot of championship points to qualify. In past years, there's been a threshold determined by each region to hit, but this time it was certain N number of players, and I think they have continued that into this next season. Also, anyone who won a regional or got at least top 4 at an international automatically qualified for Worlds. I don't know whether that's been adjusted at all. There's a lot that I don't know about the specific details around this season, but these kinds of things change from year to year anyway, and you can look them up. And those players who qualified by winning a regional or placing well in an international did not count toward the top N then for their particular region. So, for example, Wolfglick was skipped in determining the top 75 North America players. I've never been to Worlds. I've never been remotely close to qualifying for it, and I'm not sure I would go to a tournament without being able to compete, but many people do. Once again, it's a massive Pokemon convention kind of thing. They have a Pokemon Center store. They have a whole bunch of side events. They have... Again, I've never gone. I don't know in depth, but I think a lot of things for a lot of different kinds of fans to be entertained by. And I know there's often a lot of demand for spectator passes. I think there's a lottery system to get them, but I've never tried to myself, so I don't know in depth how it works. I think it's another instance where they sell out very quickly. And even then, there's some luck involved in actually getting one. For weeks before Worlds this year, I was seeing people trying to find spectator passes who were probably out of luck because it was probably just too late. I think you had to be on top of that months in advance, but I do not know the details. You'll have to go to someone else to get that information. And also, I don't need to say it. I would not want to go to this World specifically for certain reasons. But if you do want to, I'm sorry, I just don't know how. But you'll have to be on top of that one way or another. Now, all of these events are a lot of fun, but they probably involve travel, except locals. If you're in, a big city or something, you might have locals near you. You can just go hang out at your local store. But if you're going to regional or an international or Worlds, some players travel to a lot of those. A lot of players are not really able to. I don't really have the time or money, given that there are no regionals especially close to me, to travel to a bunch of them. Most I can do is probably like 2 or 3 a year. Last season I only went to 1. This season it might only be 1. So you might be looking for other ways to play, and that is where official online competitions come in. I think they're listed down here as well. Yeah. So these are grand challenges and global challenges. There was a grand challenge just recently. You've probably heard something about it. I have a post about my result from it, although I didn't play this one especially seriously. There are a number of these events that run throughout the year, ranging between about 3 and 8. There's They often change how they do it depending on the season. And they can be called a grand challenge or a global challenge. The difference is grand challenges are only open to players from the Pokemon Company international regions, the same 5 I've listed before, basically players outside of East and Southeast Asia, while global challenges are also open to those Asian players. There are usually like 3 or 4 global challenges, and they are very important to the Asian competitive circuits. They determine qualification for things like Japan Nationals, Korea Nationals, which then determine world spots from those countries. Grand challenges, a little bit lower stakes because they are only open to Western players, and this season they've cut down the championship points payout from the challenges quite a lot compared to last season. So they can make a difference to people's Worlds invitations, but I don't think people are playing them as seriously as before. But we'll see how that bears out over the course of the season. You can see there's only 1 challenge in a given month, and some months are skipped. For example, December is skipped this season. There are probably going to be 8 of these total. We can reasonably guess that there will probably be 3 global challenges in February, March, and April, because that's a typical number of those challenges and a typical time of year for them, but they haven't been announced yet. There have been 5 grand challenges announced with some obvious space for global challenges to slot in between. Now, global challenges work very differently from in-person tournaments. And I'm just going to say GCs. When I say GC, I mean both global and grand, okay? The things that I'm saying from here apply to both of them. They work very differently from in-person tournaments. They are official tournaments, from in-person ones in a few ways. Something I don't think I remembered to mention yet is that at an in-person tournament in a TPCI region, you are playing best of 3 open team sheet. You might see people in competitive spaces say Bo3 or say OTS. Here's what those things mean. Best of 3 means exactly what it means in any competition. You play games until somebody has won 2 of them. And given that ties are extremely rare, well, you play up to 3 games total. Given that ties are extremely rare in VGC, the games are heavily engineered to avoid them ever happening. Generally, that's going to involve a winner being determined, right? As soon as somebody wins 2 games in a best of 3 set, they are the winner of the set. You don't even have to play game 3 if they win the first 2. And it's over. But you don't just win 1 game to win a round in an in-person tournament. You do have to win 3 in TPCI regions. Open team sheet means you get a lot of information on what it is that your opponent is using against you. I mentioned here on RK9 Labs, you submit your team sheet before the tournament, and you include information like what Pokemon you're using, items, abilities, Tera Types, moves. All of that information is printed out on a sheet of paper and disclosed to your opponent during the round. The way it works, I think at a local, you can just like fill them out on a sheet of paper by hand. At a regional or an international, the tournament staff print out all of the sheets before the first round. And once you're seated for round 1, they know where you're sitting because you're assigned your seat for the round. You know, you're assigned a particular table, a particular opponent. They go by before round 1 and they give you your sheet. You then hold on to this sheet of paper. It has your open team sheet information printed out in multiple languages. So you don't have to bring this yourself. The tournament staff provide it after you submit your information on RK9. You hold on to that throughout the day. And each round you swap it with your opponent just before you start playing. I think there is like a typical standard for when you're supposed to swap them. I think there's probably an actual rule. Like, I think it's during the 1.5 minutes of team preview where you're choosing what Pokemon to bring is when you're supposed to swap team sheets. That said, personally, I basically have just always swapped them whenever my opponent wants to. If it's a little earlier than that, I don't care. But some players do. And then you have to make sure you remember to swap back afterward because you need to have your own sheet again the next round to swap with somebody else. You can get your sheet replaced, but best to hold on to it and not make that work for the tournament judges. Open team sheet gives, again, the information that I listed. Species, forms. So if you're running like Urshifu, it'll tell them whether it's Rapid Strike or Single Strike form. Tera Type, item, ability, moves. There's no information on stats in the open team sheet. Even though you do submit stat values, we did that demonstration earlier with this level 63 Gengar. Nothing about your stats is shown to your opponent on the team sheet. So they cannot infer your EVs, your nature, your IVs, none of that. But all the rest of that information is. And that way you can't surprise them with some zany Tera Type or something. So it incentivizes first of all, it makes for a more fair and balanced game when you can't do that, but also it incentivizes building teams that are consistent instead of silly tricks that will not fool an opponent who already knows what's coming. But the reason I bring that up in the context of GCs is GCs are not like that. GCs are best of one closed team sheet. They work like ranked battles on the ladder. They're basically the same thing in a competitive format. It works exactly like ranked battles. You queue in, you queue into an opponent, you get the team preview. That's all you get, what Pokemon they have, maybe what forms, if that's disclosed at team preview, exactly like in ranked battles. And you play best of one, only the one game, like in ranked battles. Closed team sheet, you don't get all that open team sheet information, like in ranked battles. You see their Pokemon at team preview, that's it. This leads to a wide range of opinions on the GCs. Personally, I love the GCs because they account for a large proportion of the chances that I get to play in an official competition. But if you're a top player on the Worlds grind in an area with a lot of locals or something, some players feel differently. And I've seen some new players sort of pick up on the fact that a lot of top players don't like the GCs and feel like maybe there's something they should be worried about. Honestly, it just depends on what kind of player you are and what you enjoy about this game, right? Top players like best of 3 open team sheet because it is genuinely kind of more fair and balanced. You're not going to be surprised by a weird gimmick as easily. And even if you are, you can adjust over the rest of a best of 3 set. And some players find the variance and sort of the inherent incentive to trick opponents that comes in best of 1 closed team sheet to be frustrating to play against. Because in best of 1 closed team sheet, there's a lot more incentive to run surprising techs that opponents won't be expecting, right? There's more of an emphasis placed on that. And when people are gunning hard for championship points and they lose out on possible placement to surprise gimmicks, that can be frustrating to a lot of players. That is not personally how I feel about it. I do think that, you know, best of 3 open team sheet has more competitive integrity, but I do also enjoy best of 1 closed team sheet. I like both versions. There are some players who don't. You probably know yourself as a viewer of this better than I do and have a better sense of what you like and don't like. It's possible that you will also be frustrated by GCs and not enjoy them, but I wouldn't take other players' word for it before you try them out yourself. So don't be too scared by especially top players complaining about GCs. I do still find them to be a lot of fun. A GC takes place over a weekend. Oh, I forgot to say about internationals. I'll circle back to that for neat organization chapter purposes. GCs take place over a weekend, Friday to Sunday. You will get a period of time, several days, to sign up for the GC before it starts. The way to sign up for a GC is you go into the Poke Portal Battle Stadium like you're doing ranked battles. There's a section for official competitions, and you want to search for a competition. And if a GC is accepting signups, you'll be able to find it there. If you want to be able to earn championship points from a GC, you need to make sure that your game is linked to your Trainer Club account. We went over this already, right? Once you sign up for a GC, this is very important. You get a good window of time to sign up for a GC, right up to shortly before it starts. When you sign up for a GC, you lock in the team that you're going to use. And unlike an in-person tournament where you can change your team sheet submission, there is no such thing for a GC. The team that you lock in for a GC is what you're using in the event, no matter what. No changes whatsoever. In fact, not only can you not change the team you've entered, but the Pokemon that you've entered, as they sit in your box, also cannot be changed. If I sign up this Gengar for a GC, and I accidentally put in Shadow Punch instead of Shadow Ball, there's no changing that once I've signed up and the team is locked in. I can't even go and change the move on the Gengar in my box until the GC is over and my team is unlocked. So that is very important. Make sure your team is correct. Again, you get plenty of time to sign up. Sign-ups close just before it starts, just before battle starts, so you get several days. Do not sign up until your team is ready, and be sure to double check because you cannot correct any errors later. This time, like I said, I'm in Discord servers with a bunch of new players who are playing GCs for the first time. The reason I'm putting so much emphasis on this is with the recent one that I'm looking at here, it felt like a lot of people were popping up on Discord and saying, oh, whoops, I accidentally had this mistake in my team. There are a lot of details to get right on a Pokemon. One thing that I do when I'm training my Pokemon to keep everything straight is to go in a consistent order throughout. So typically, I will change a Pokemon's nature using a mint, and then I'll EV train it, and then I'll level it up to 50 if it's not there yet, and then I'll hyper train it, and then I'll do the Tera Type. Like, I have a steady order, and that makes sure I hit the whole checklist. But you can just make a checklist, right? Write one out, whatever works for you. Just make sure you double check, because you cannot correct errors for GC. Also, if you have an error at an in-person tournament, like a regional or an international, that happens to players too. It is avoidable. You should make sure you double check and don't let it happen to you, because a team sheet error could cost you, right? If the sheet that you submit doesn't match what you actually brought, or it does, but it's not what you meant to bring, maybe you get into a bad competitive position because of it, or maybe if it doesn't match, maybe you suffer a penalty in the tournament, like you can't use that Pokemon anymore. Very important that you get that right. And for GC, there's no chance to correct. Battles take place Friday to Sunday. The way a GC works is you play up to 45 battles. You do not have to play all of them. You can play as few as you want, but 45 is the limit for how many you can play, the upper limit. GCs usually have some kind of participation prize. It's not usually anything super interesting, but once in a while it is. And to earn those, you typically just have to play 3 battles. If that's all you're interested in, you can just do 3 battles and then you're done. But if you are interested in properly competing in the challenge, you get 15 battles available on the Friday, the next 15 unlock on the Saturday, and the next 15 unlock on the Sunday. You can play all 45 on Sunday. I don't recommend it, but the option exists. There's an early end to how soon you can play each increment of 15 battles, but there's not a late end except the end of the entire challenge. So if you don't play it all on Friday, you can still play those 15 games on Saturday or on Sunday. Like I said, you can play all 45 on Sunday. Whatever you want to do, but the limit for Friday is 15. The limit for Saturday is 30 cumulatively, and the limit for Sunday is 45 cumulatively. And I'm throwing around the words Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. When does it actually start? The answer is midnight UTC on Friday. I don't think I'm going to sit here and explain time zones in this video. UTC, sort of a universal standard that you can easily tie other time zones to. You can find out the relationship between your time zone and UTC by Googling, a time zone converter. And you can plug in, if you don't know already, UTC and your time zone. Or another thing that I do if I want to just be sure is current time UTC. And then I can just do the math. It's about 4 p.m. for me right now, 7 p.m. UTC, so I'm 3 hours behind. I am right now in the Atlantic time zone in North America, and it's daylight saving time, so 3 hours behind UTC. If you're in the Eastern time zone, you're 4 hours behind. 7 in Pacific, 7 hours behind in Pacific time. And the Grand Challenge starts at the same time for the whole world. It is midnight UTC, Thursday night, if you prefer to think about it that way, but like the very beginning of calendar Friday UTC. So for me, the recent Grand Challenge started at 9 p.m. Thursday night. If you were on Eastern Daylight Time, 8 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. You get the idea. You cannot sign up for the GC after it has started. You can sign up until right before it starts, but very often when one starts, I see people like 1 or 2 hours in who want to sign up and are disappointed that it's too late. But once you're signed up, your team is locked in. You can play your 45 games. It's fun. I enjoy it. There's some kind of ELO rating system or something to track how well you're doing. And if it's a global challenge, you can check results in Pokemon Home later, though I'm not sure you can for a Grand Challenge. Like I said, I really enjoy these because you will see people hating on these because some people don't like their effect on Worlds qualification, especially since Worlds is played in best of 3 open team sheet, and so best of 1 closed team sheet. It's kind of a different game, kind of warps things a little bit. I'm a big fan of GCs because I do not get a ton of opportunities to compete in person, and I like still having a decent number of official competitions to play. That's my personal stance on this. Your mileage may vary. What was I doing next? Right. How to get your Pokemon ready to go. So, if you're not using a rental code, and I should say you are not allowed to use a rental code in an official competition. You want to play a regular old community run tournament unofficial, you can probably use a rental code. Depends on the tournament. Some of those are even played on Showdown. If you want to enter a regional or an international or worlds, or if you qualified, or a GC, you cannot use a rental code. You have to have the actual Pokemon in your game, trained and ready to go. That means catching them, or breeding, or whatever it might be, and training them up. Most Pokemon that you need in Scarlet and Violet are available in Scarlet and Violet, but that is not strictly the case. We have here a list of Pokemon that cannot be obtained in Scarlet and Violet. Most of these are just not programmed into the games, but if I scroll down here, never mind, I'll probably cut this part. This is just a list of Pokemon that don't exist in Scarlet and Violet. Thanks, Serebii. There are competitively relevant Pokemon that are not available to catch in Scarlet and Violet. For example, Ursaluna, except the Blood Moon form, the regular form of Ursaluna, only in Legends Arceus. Enamorus, only in Legends Arceus. Not super competitively relevant, but it's a Pokemon. Sneasler, you hear a lot about Sneasler playing Reg H. You can only get that in Legends Arceus. There are Pokemon that you can only get in Sword and Shield, like Calyrex. There are Pokemon like Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus that you can get in Legends Arceus, or Sword and Shield, or various earlier games, but you cannot get in Scarlet and Violet. Why did Pokemon do it this way? I don't know, probably to make people buy more games. It's not ideal. And you'll see people sometimes complaining about this making VGC pay to win. To be honest, I do think it's not ideal. I don't feel super strongly about it because the cost of buying more Pokemon games is a lot less than I've ever paid to go to one regional. So I think serious players can eat this cost, but it definitely is a barrier to access for a lot of new players. You can try to trade for Pokemon. However, be careful about that because people hack Pokemon into the games. They generate Pokemon that were not obtained through normal gameplay, or they use hacking tools to modify Pokemon. I'm not going to go into detail on how people do this, partly because I don't want to, and partly because I don't actually know how people do this. It's not of much interest to me, so I've never looked into it much. Pokemon that are hacked or otherwise modified by an external device, let me be clear about this, are not tournament legal. You will sometimes see people use the word legal for hacked Pokemon that are functionally indistinguishable from legitimate Pokemon. So Pokemon that have, a Gengar with a level 50 Gengar with a special attack stat of 182. That is something that Gengar can have legitimately. It can know Thunderbolt legitimately, but if it knew Fire Blast and it had if it knew Fire Blast and had a special attack stat of 420, that would be a whole other thing. That would be not the same as a Gengar that could be obtained legitimately. But a lot of people who hack Pokemon will make Pokemon that could be obtained legitimately. They just use external devices to make them more quickly. People will sometimes refer to those Pokemon as legal because they're functionally indistinguishable from legal Pokemon in that sense. That is a misleading term. They are not tournament legal. Any Pokemon obtained through an external device, not tournament legal. And Pokemon does run in a GC. I don't think that, in a GC, if you can sign the Pokemon up, realistically it'll work. At an in-person major tournament, they do run hack checks. They select people to check their teams. I've been hack checked a few times, and I'm not an especially, I'm not a top player or anything like that. And we don't know, because they don't want to tell us and help people evade it, exactly what values they check for, but there are a number of hidden values in the Pokemon that they can look at. All of this means I strongly recommend, well, certainly I would say do not use Pokemon that you hacked yourself at a tournament. I think that's not really an okay thing to do, and also you risk getting disqualified. But sadly, it also means that even though trading Pokemon is a core mechanic in this game, there is a risk to doing it, because if you're trading with strangers online, they might give you a hacked Pokemon. You might enter that in a tournament without knowing, and it might be caught and get you disqualified. Or lose one of your Pokemon for the duration of your tournament run, which also can heavily sabotage your run. I don't think it's worth the risk. I mean, look, your means are up to you. Personally, I just own all of the recent Pokemon games with all relevant DLC, and I can pretty much get whatever I need in my own games. So I don't need to rely on trading. If you are relying on trading, I would be careful to use trusted sources. But given that you need a few different games to get all of the relevant competitive Pokemon, I can understand if there are some difficulties with access to it there for sure. Just be careful. Some Pokemon are version exclusive. You can only catch Koraidon and Scarlet, Miraidon and Violet, and so on. Some Pokemon are locked behind some annoying quests. For Blood Moon or Ursaluna, I think you need to fill the Kitakami Pokedex. For Raging Bolt and Gouging Fire, you need to fill the Blueberry Pokedex in Scarlet. For Iron Boulder and Iron Crown, same thing in Violet. Personally, I would say if you're doing that, I would recommend building basically a living Pokedex in Pokemon Home, getting all of the Pokemon that you need and keeping them in Home, so that if you want to make a new file and get a second Raging Bolt or something, you can just transfer them in. I keep a living dex in Home. It's a huge time saver for that kind of thing. Walking Wake and Iron Leaves have only been distributed as raid events every so often. I don't know whether there will ever be another distribution of them, but they are weirdly annoying Pokemon to get for competitive play. But for the most part, if you are willing to own a few games, or like me, you're a huge fan and you own them already, you're mostly fine for getting the Pokemon that you need. If not, like I said, it's annoying to have to buy more games, but I mean, I spend a lot more money just to go to a single regional than that costs, so I don't see it as the end of the world. If your means are limited and you're having a difficult time there, just at the very least, look for trusted trading partners. People you know well, ideally. As far as training Pokemon goes, I've gotten into a little bit already. Pokemon Showdown itself is a good resource for seeing what a Pokemon can do. For example, I can see all of Gengar's moves here. I can experiment with stat sliders and stuff. You also can go to websites like Bulbapedia or Serebii for all the information you need on a Pokemon. Those are both pretty good for that kind of thing. I'd say it's a matter of personal preference which one you'd rather use. I use both, but I do use Bulbapedia more at this point. Training Pokemon is going to look very different in Pokemon Champions, I think. Obtaining Pokemon might as well. People are really getting their hopes up about that. I will say a caution about Pokemon Champions is we don't actually know very much about it right now. It looks like you can use Pokemon that you have in Home, but you still have to have obtained them somewhere. And it looks like you can recruit Pokemon somehow in Champions. We do not know the details of what will go into that or what will be available. It also looks like you can change EVs and stuff on the fly, which is awesome, but it will cost an in-game currency that you earn by battling. I don't know how onerous that's going to be. People are throwing around a lot of assumptions about what will or will not be possible in Champions. A lot of those assumptions are not super well grounded in the facts, because the facts that we have are not very many. It does look promising. It might not be the free-for-all, get any Pokemon you want easily that some people think it is. It might be, but it might not. Just caution on that. Training Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet, like I said, I usually go through the checklist in basically the same order to make sure that I hit everything. And it's use a mint. You can buy them at whatever the medicine store is called. I go to the one in Cascarafa near the Pokemon Center by the desert to change the Pokemon's nature to whatever you want. Then I EV train it, so I distribute these points however I like. You can use... There are a number of ways to EV train. There are items in the game collectively called vitamins. These are your protein, carbos, calcium, iron, zinc, and HP up. Each of them corresponds to a stat. And each vitamin that you use gives 10 points in the stat. 10, 20, etc. You can do the same thing with Mochis from Ogre Oustin and Kitakami. And if you want to remove EVs from a Pokemon, the Fresh Start Mochi will do that. There also are berries that can remove EVs. I think they remove 10 at a time, but feel free to fact check me on that. You can find, they're like Palmic Berry, Kelpsy Berry. I don't remember the full list, but you can find them in the eastern part of Paldea. Feather items, Health Feather, Clever Feather, Genius Feather, Swift Feather, and so on. They also EV train a Pokemon, but only once at a time. 1 feather, 1 point. And remember, it takes 4 points and then increments of 8 to actually get any value out of them. The other thing is you can EV train the old-fashioned way. Every Pokemon in the game has some number of EVs that it gives for knocking it out, and so you can go knock Pokemon out to get the EVs that way and add them up as you go. There are items in the game, the Power Lens, Power Anklet, Power Bracer, and so on, that will increase the EVs that you gain so you can make it somewhat faster. I actually do this fairly often because vitamins cost a lot of money in game, and to keep track of the EVs that I'm getting, I use the Maryland EV training guide. So I can go here. Let's say I want to train my Gengar in special attack. Right? Let's say I want to train my Gengar in special attack. I can go to the western part of Paldea near Porto Marinada. And Maryland has some recommended options here. Or I could go to the early game area and beat up a bunch of Psyduck. Each Psyduck gives 1 EV in special attack. If the power item gives +8, so each Psyduck will give 9 EVs in special attack now. And I can just go around playing the game, knocking out Psyduck, and each time I knock one out, boom. 9, 18, 27, and so on. And each Pokemon in my party that can still gain EVs will get special attack EVs for the Psyduck. Although if it doesn't have a power lens, it'll only get 1 point from each Psyduck. What I actually do is I go to the western area near Porto Marinada, and then I knock out Flaffy and Girafarig. They both give the same EVs, 2 without the power lens, 10 with. I just fill it out as I knock them out. So this is just a handy tool for keeping track of what EVs you're getting. This is what I use when I'm EV training the old-fashioned way. Then I make sure my Pokemon is at least at level 50. I go to Montenevera. There's an NPC near an Bomb of Snow near the Pokemon Center who will take 1 bottle cap to hyper train 1 stat. So any hyper training I need to get done there to get my EVs to 31. Then I go to what's it called? Larry's gym in blanking on the name of the city, but if you played Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, you probably remember Larry. I go to his gym, the restaurant, and there's someone there who will change a Pokemon's Tera Type. If you give them 50 Tera Shards of a given type. So let's say I give 50 Electric Tera Shards. I can change my Gengar's Tera Type to Electric. 50 Tera Shards can take a while to get. You can get Tera Shards from raids. Sometimes you can get them from the item printer. Sometimes you can find them on the ground. What I personally did when I was starting out in Scarlet and Violet is I just did a lot of raids until I had at least 100 shards of every type. And now whenever I dip below 100 in any type, I do raids to replenish them. And there's an item called the Glimmering Charm. I don't remember how to get that. It was added in the Teal Mask, I think. Okay, if you finish the Kitakami Pokedex, which again is easy to do if you build a living dex in home, you can do it once and then easily transfer the Pokemon in on any future files you make. You get the Glimmering Charm, which ups the number of Tera Shards that you get from raids and actually makes that farming a lot faster. Then I make sure that my Gengar has all the right moves, level up, TMs. Egg moves work differently now in Scarlet and Violet. You do not need to breed for egg moves. You just make sure the Pokemon has an empty move slot, give it a Mirror Herb to hold, and start a picnic with another Pokemon that knows the move you want. Let's say I have an Amoonguss. It knows Clear Smog. I give a Mirror Herb to Gengar. I start a picnic with these 2 Pokemon. I make sure Gengar doesn't already know 4 moves. And as soon as I end the picnic, Gengar will know Clear Smog. And they just need to be in the same picnic. There's nothing else that has to happen. So you can just start the picnic and then end it, and your Gengar will be all set. And then I guess the last optimization. Oh, make sure I have the right held item that I want. And then the last optimization that I don't always bother with, I always do this for an in-person major tournament. I don't always do this for anything else. But you can use PP ups. You can buy PP ups, I think at Delibird Presents, and you can use them up to 3 times on each move, and that will increase the number of times that you're able to use the move, right? PP, power points, number of times you can use a move, goes up if you use a PP up. Not going to come into play a lot of the time because VGC games tend to be fairly short, but you don't want to run out of PP in a clutch situation. Like I said, I don't usually bother except for major tournaments, but if I will make an exception sometimes, like if it's Shadow Rider Calyrex, for example, that I'm using, Astral Brawler starts with 5 PP. That can run out pretty quickly. Maybe I just want to PP up that one specific move so that I have 8, so that I'm less likely to run out in ranked battles or in a GC. That's how you train your Pokemon on a basic level in Scarlet and Violet. That will change in Champions. Champions will be out probably in a few months. We don't know the specific release date yet. One other thing I want to cover. Two last things to cover here. One is resources to help you do well at VGC. One very important one I've touched on already, VGCPastes. You do not need to build your own teams. I enjoy building my own teams. I think it's a fun activity. I think a lot of the fun of the game is in building. And so I would feel like I was depriving myself if I didn't ever build my own teams. But I still use rentals sometimes. And some people don't find all that much fun in building. However, if you are going to build a team, what are some valuable resources to help you out? Well, first, let's back up a little bit. This first one on this list is actually more general. Oh, hang on. Sorry. I said I'd go back to one quick thing about international championships. I mentioned that regional championships play the day one games on Saturday and then the rest on Sunday. I do recommend checking in on Friday, but there's nothing at the tournament that happens there. That is not the case at an international championship. At an international championship, so these, you can check in on Thursday. That's the day that I would recommend arriving. Day one games are played on Friday. Day two games and most of the top cut knockout bracket are played on Saturday. Only the finals are played on Sunday. The way it works is they run them all on one stream consecutively. They go through Pokemon Go, Pokemon trading card game, Pokemon video games usually last, all the different age divisions. So only finals are on Sunday. Day one games are on Friday at an international championship. They're on Saturday at a regional, Friday at an international. Now, resources to do well. Big one is VGC Guide. This was created by Wolf Glick, Aaron Zhang, Aaron Trailer, and at least a couple of other people. It has a ton of information, not only on team building, but also on battling, on the circuit. The in-game guide is outdated, but number of resources linked. This is the attempt by the authors to start to create a timeless resource to help people get into VGC. I probably should have plugged this at the very beginning of the video. Maybe I'll go back and record something. I'll definitely try to link it in the description. But you can see they have a bunch of written pieces, pretty quick reads and informative, giving an overview of the basics, foundational concepts, and then they do deeper dives into how to battle, how to build teams, and so on. I have no involvement with the creation of this. I'm not affiliated with VGC Guide at all. I don't know these people personally. I am a fan of Wolf Glick. I talk about that often on the channel. I'm a paying subscriber to his Patreon. He got me into VGC in the first place, but I don't know the guy personally. In general, I have no connection to any of the resources I'm going to plug here. I'm mostly just plugging things that I use or that I've heard are good. And VGC Guide is definitely very valuable for a primer to get you started in this game. For specific resources that will help you with building teams, it can be helpful for one thing to know the usage statistics. For that, my go-to is Munchstats. You can go to a given format. It doesn't seem to have Reg J, but let's say you want Reg H because that's the tournament format right now. You can see what the most used Pokemon are. Is that showing up? Yeah. So our Chaladon, number one in usage apparently. Goldango close behind, Dragonite, Sneasler, about what I'd expect in Reg H right now. And if we want to see how people are using our Chaladon, we got move usage. You can see nearly all of them run Electro Shot. A large majority run Flash Cannon. I'm surprised at how many run Protect. I thought more of them were running Assault Vest, but maybe that's changed recently. You can see the common teammates. Our Chaladon is often used on Rain teams because Rain changes Electro Shot from a one-turn attack to a two-turn attack, so Pelipper is its most common partner, actually the only one on a majority of our Chaladon teams. We've got Dragonite, Goldango, Incineroar, and so on. Item usage, I thought Assault Vest was way higher than this. I'm surprised to see this. See, it can be valuable to check the stats somehow, sometimes, because you might be surprised by what you find. Similarly, I thought Stamina would be higher than Sturdy, but I guess the way people play our Chaladon has changed some in this second run of Reg H. You can get a little bit of a look at how people are typically training them, EV spreads, natures, common Tera types, electric, most common on our Chaladon. Looks like people are really loving the fast, power herb, sturdy stuff that Wolf Glick uses right now. I get the impression that a lot more new players have heard of Pikalytics, this stat site here. In my experience, Pikalytics, I don't know the behind-the-scenes details or anything, but Pikalytics is updated much less often and is so often just badly outdated that honestly, this is the first time in probably a few months that I've even looked at it. Just for the purposes of this video, I do not recommend using Pikalytics anymore. My go-to for usage information is Munchstats. You can also find tournament performance data very helpful to determining... Oh, sorry, I should say this can help you figure out how you want to use a Pokemon. How other people use it can be a good guide for what is good, what works well. That said, you want to see what works well, you want to look at tournament performance. Top Cut Explorer is good for that. I featured this resource very often in my VGC Legends series when I'm looking for inspiration. You can look at what Pokemon did well at events. So let's Reg H right now. Let's look at the Toronto Regional Championship from last year. That was also the last regional that I went to. You can see the Wolf Glick won with this team. If I click on this, I get his open team sheet. This is all the open team sheet information right here in one place. You can do that for any of these. Top Cut Explorer has generally a cutoff for team performance, so you can't go further than the top 256 in Toronto here. There were a lot more participants than that, but that's all that we'll show you on this site. But let's say I want to see what people were doing with our Chowdon in this event. You can break it down by Pokemon. I don't think this drop-down menu shows up in the video, but I have just opened a drop-down menu. And I want to check our Chowdon. There's 75 our Chowdon on the top 256 teams. And we get a breakdown of how they each were used. Bug was the most common Tera Type here. Stamina was the most common ability. Assault Vest was the most common item. That's all more along the lines of what I expected. I was genuinely surprised on the spot by what I saw in Munchstats. We can see move usage here, teammates here. Pelipper still the most common. That's not surprising. Electroshot still the most common move. And we can see a list of our Chowdon teams down here. Wolf Glick obviously used it on his winning team. Then the next highest performing one was Darsh Patel, and so on all the way down the line here. And by doing this, I can also isolate specific things that I'm looking to work on. So let's say I know that I want to use Assault Vest or Chowdon. All of the Assault Vest or Chowdon that performed well here were running Stamina as their ability. About half of them were running Bug as their Tera Type. But let's say I really don't want my Chowdon to fall asleep. I want to see Tera Grass instead. I could see that all of those were run with Body Press and Electroshot. Flash Cannon was the next most common move, and then Dragon Pulse. Pelipper was on all but one of these teams. What's the one team without Pelipper? A lot of Basculegion, Amoonguss, Standard Reg H Rain. I can see what the teams look like. Cedric Bernier had the highest placing Tera Grass, Assault Vest, or Chowdon. Then Riley Factura, and so on. Which one didn't have Pelipper? I'm actually pretty curious about that. Oh, it's this one down here, Arya Black, with our Chowdon, Sneasler, Incineroar, Kingdra, Murkrow, and Rillaboom. So I guess Murkrow was the Rain Dance user. Yeah. So you can get data like that to see what's performing at a very high level in tournaments. And Top Cut Explorer is very useful because you have all these filters to check the specific details of what you're looking for with a given Pokemon. Labmaus is another one that I enjoy. Labmaus will show you all of the teams from a given tournament, but it doesn't have all the same filters for you to break down performance like Top Cut Explorer does. But let's say I want to see the same event, the Toronto Regional. Official, Regulation H. Toronto is the most recent one. You can see 735 players. We can actually see all of their teams in this view. And we get a basic usage breakdown here as well. Looks like I accidentally flipped it. Oh, I accidentally sorted it by win rate. Oh, well, there we go. The top Pokemon by win rate was Mienshao, which was only on one team. But it did pretty well. Made day 2. And we can see the set. Little bit weaker in terms of the filters available than Top Cut Explorer, but it does give you a view of the entire tournament. That said, if you want to see what's performing well at a very high level, Top Cut Explorer is probably good enough most of the time. I don't know why this went to a Yahoo page. I had the actual web page open. This is Statcrusher. I've never used this, but I've heard it talked up recently. You can use this to calculate EV spreads. It looks like it shows you a graph, basically, of usage data of particular investment amounts, so you can see what benchmarks you want to aim for when you're in the weeds figuring out your own EV spreads. I've never used this myself, but it does look like a pretty neat tool. Maybe next time I have a tournament coming up. Let's see what people are investing in for special defense in Incineroar. I usually put a lot of special defense on mine. Okay, I think the graph is cut off, but it is, the x-axis is EV benchmarks and then percentage usage of each of them. So that could be good for figuring out if you want to speed creep things. You want to make your Incineroar a little bit faster than other Incineroar or something. You can see what kind of speed they're investing. That's, I gather, what this is useful for. Oh, it did have Statcrusher open already. Oh, it just opened in a new tab. I see. I see what happened there. If you're building your own team, you probably want a damage calculator, because part of figuring out how much to invest in a given attacking stat, you don't always want the full 252, and you can't be sure whether you want that modest nature bump or not. Unless you run some calculations and you determine how much damage you need to do to knock out certain common threats. You can use things like Munchstats again, Statcrusher. This is not Munchstats. Munchstats and Statcrusher to figure out what other people are often running, and then you can compare your damage against those common spreads to make sure that you're doing the amount of damage that you need to accomplish your goals. And you can also figure out how much bulk to invest in by determining what you need to take hits from common threats. All of that can be done with a damage calculator. This is the Pokemon Showdown one. This is what I personally use. I have heard many times that it's not recommended for VGC. I don't actually know why that is. I don't think I've ever had any issue using it. If I have, I haven't noticed. This is just the calculator that I'm used to. But also, I personally don't run a lot of calcs because I find them boring. Like I said, I think the best thing you can do with Pokemon is play it in a way that you enjoy. And personally, when the game becomes all about the hard numbers for me and not playing off of vibes, is when I start to get bored. But I still run calcs sometimes, especially for draft league prep or if I'm really serious about a major tournament or something. And some players run a lot more calcs than I do and actually try to memorize them and stuff. But let's say I want my Gengar to... Let's say I want to knock out Ice Rider Calyrex with my Gengar. Okay? Let's say we're playing Regulation I, and I want to knock out Ice Rider Calyrex with my Gengar with Shadow Ball. Right now, with no stat modifications or anything, you can see I've set doubles, level 50 to 62.8%. Now let's say I want to go to Munchstats. I want to go to Regulation I. And I want to see what kinds of spreads people are typically using on Ice Rider Calyrex. The most common nature by far is Adamant, and next is Brave. Those both boost attack. They don't boost special defense. But I can see... these EV spread breakdowns, they're so small and diverse that I don't know there's that much value in them. But, alright, a lot of Ice Rider are running some amount of special defense investment. Let's say 196 EVs, because I see a few of those spreads have that. So, 196. And then... they're all running, pretty much all running max HP. At least all the ones we can see there. Now that Shadow Ball is not doing so much damage, right? Let's say I give my Gengar a modest nature. Let's save the nature for later. Let's say I give it a Life Orb. And actually, Special Attack is Gengar's highest stat, so the marginal 10% boost is most... I get the most numbers out of that, putting it in Special Attack. So let's go ahead and plug in a modest nature. Maybe there's something that I really need Gengar to outspeed and I need a timid nature instead. But with a modest nature, we're doing 54 to 65% now. Let's adjust the EVs upward. I think I'm just going to need 252 to get into one-hit KO range here. Yeah, still not even there. Maybe I want choice specs on my Gengar for more damage. Still not enough. Maybe I want Terra Ghost. That KOs. But that's a ton of commitment to that one thing. Maybe I don't need to one-shot Ice Rider Calyrex. Maybe I need... to just reliably two-shot it with Life Orb Shadow Ball, right? Well, in that case, maybe I don't need the modest nature and I can't afford timid. And maybe I can even get away with fewer special attack EVs. In fact, this is already a guaranteed 2-hit KO with no special attack EVs. So there's a lot you can play around. This was a silly example that I made up on the spot. Ice Rider Calyrex didn't work super well here for this exercise. Let's do Dragapult instead, actually. You might see Dragapult sometimes in Reg H. Well, I see that Shadow Ball is guaranteed to KO. What if for some reason they're running max HP? Not quite guaranteed anymore. You can bump the investment up. And so on. Usually the way people do EV spreads is talked about in VGC Guide in more depth than I can do, but they figure out how much speed they need and then what hits they need to take, what damage they need to do. Damage calculator is where you do that. I use this one because I don't know why people say not to, but if you're willing to just take people's word for it, this is the one that a lot of VGC players use, the Nimbasa City Post. Nerd of Now damage calculator. If you just Google Nerd of Now damage calculator, you can find it. You can import sets as well, so I could build a Gengar in Showdown, make whatever EV choices I want, and import it into the calculator and then test it against various stuff. Next resource that I find very valuable for that I hear is very valuable for practice. I have not actually used this next one myself. I keep thinking that I should and then not actually bothering, but it does seem useful. I might try it out next time I have a regional coming up, but I've said that before. It is this spreadsheet, PASRS. I don't remember what that stands for. I think people commonly call this PASRS. Honestly, what came to my mind when I first saw it was Pacers, like the basketball team. But if you hear people talk about PASRS, this is what it is. I've never used it myself, but you can save your replays when you're playing on Pokemon Showdown. Because, by the way, Pokemon Showdown Battle Simulator, you can play there, and it's another way to get some practice without having to train Pokemon in game or use a rental code. You can use whatever Pokemon you want, quick and easy. Practice on the ladder, and you can save replays of your games. It is highly recommended if you're trying to improve at the game that you save replays and review them later. And with this this tool that I'm not going to look at in depth here, that I've never personally used before, but I've heard is very valuable, you can plug in your replays and it'll populate with data about what Pokemon you're bringing to your games, how well they're performing, what your win rate is with different lead combinations and in different matchups, and so on. I've never looked very closely into it, but it does sound very cool. The other thing that I would say is a valuable resource to improving at the game, especially if you're brand new and you don't really know what you're going to be running into, definitely playing the game is the best practice. But there are YouTubers who are very good at the game and can show you how a lot of different strategies work, break down a lot of different matchups, and give you a window into how they think about the game. I am not plugging myself here, but feel free to subscribe. I do make a lot of gameplay content. But like I said, I'm not a top player. I'm to some extent fumbling around figuring things out in my content. I do try to give a window into my thought process, but it's not the thought process of an elite championship contender. But I have opened up a few channels here of people that I watch, or at least have watched, to learn more about the game myself. Wolf Glick, as I've said, is the one who got me into the game. Now, this was back in 2020 when more of his content was raw, unedited gameplay. I'm not sure he's as valuable for learning how to play on the fly as he used to be. I think his content has just kind of moved away from that to an extent. You can learn a lot from his tournament recaps. He goes into a lot of depth about some of his strategic decisions here, for example, in the EUSC video. But he doesn't do as much just laddering with commentary as he used to, which is how I learned VGC, watching him do that when I was brand new to it. But you can still learn a lot from his channel to some extent. It's just not quite as geared toward that kind of content as it used to be. If you do want to watch a YouTuber play the ladder and really thoroughly break down the strategies that they're working with, the pros and cons of their teams, and their thought process going into a particular matchup, I'm a fan of Aaron Cybertron Zhang, and I'm a fan of James Beck. I watch both of these guys for that kind of content. You can learn a lot about the metagame and how to implement different strategies and how to think through a matchup by watching both of them. And again, Aaron, like Wolf, is one of the authors of VGC Guide. You can see a lot of his thought process in written form here as well. I find Clover Bells is helpful for the team building side of the game, optimizing EVs, how to think about building in a metagame. He puts out a lot of team building content. I believe he's active on the VGC subreddit as well, RVGC. You can find posts by him there with helpful rental codes and whatnot. That's a +1 is definitely a fun watch for interesting and creative teams. Can give you some insight on how to build in a creative, off-meta way. I've found his channel relatively recently compared to those other ones, so I just haven't watched as much of it as I have an Aaron Zhang or a James Beck, but some really fun teams here for sure. And like I said, insight into how to build those and how to make use of them. And if you want talk about the format, about what's happening at tournaments, about the structure of the format, about the metagame, I like Tub Takes, uploading on this channel, CK49. So this is not where I go for gameplay. I don't think they do very much of it here, but there is a lot of talking about the state of the metagame, tournament recaps, upcoming tournaments, what they expect to happen, their approach to thinking about the structure of the season itself. That is something that I think is a little bit of a weak spot in some of the other channels, and I think is also valuable to hear perspectives on. And so this channel does a lot of good work in that area. But yeah, I would say Wolf Glick taught me the game. Maybe his content is not as geared toward that anymore, but you can learn a lot. Aaron Zhang and James Beck, good gameplay content with a lot of strong teams. That's a +1 as well. Clover Bells, helpful for the building side, and CK49, helpful for talking about the circuit. Again, I don't know any of these people personally. I'm just telling you who I watch for different kinds of information about the game. And if you have a particular favorite YouTuber that I haven't mentioned here, I'm not trying to imply anything negative about anyone. There's a good chance that I just haven't gotten around to watching them myself. That brings me to just about the end here. The last thing I would say is a little bit about the mindset for the game. So a few things that are valuable to keep in mind if you're getting into this game. One is talked about pretty well in VGC Guide. Definitely recommend reading through VGC Guide as a first step, by the way. Especially the foundational concept section. But what am I looking for? Oh, I think I'm looking for the team building section, actually. Intent. This is one of the most important lessons you can learn in VGC. I think extremely valuable to me in my gradual improvement at this game. When you are using a team, whether you're building it yourself or you are trying out something that you picked up from a rental code or a friend or something, you should have a clear understanding of what it is that you're trying to do. I see new players sometimes who just like heard that something is strong and mashed some stuff together in the team builder and can't explain why they mashed together the things that they did. And no shade there, I was often like that when I was brand new as well. But you should have some kind of clear goal behind every decision that you're making in the builder and in gameplay. It does not have to be, I think this is the single best thing. I think this is the most powerful thing and it's hard for opponents to deal with and I want to win a lot of games with it. But that is a pretty good goal to have. My team at the Toronto Regional last season, I didn't originally intend to take that team to the Regional, but I built the team because Superior is my favorite starter Pokemon, and I figured Reg H was probably the friendliest format it was going to get in Scarlet and Violet, and so I wanted to see what I could do. I built out my team to enable the Superior to try to create openings for it to snowball with Leaf Storm and Stellar Terrablast. As I iterated on the team over time, I covered certain matchups, tried to make sure the team was well-rounded, flexible into a lot of the format, so I had Tyranitar because that made life a lot harder for Sun teams and for some certain kinds of Trick Room teams. I had Garchomp because it's a strong attacker that pairs well with Tyranitar. I had Talonflame because it's a Tailwind setter that pairs well with Garchomp. Building those synergies on top of each other over time. And then the reason I ended up taking that team to a regional, even though Superior is honestly not very good in Reg H, is that I'd been building out that team and iterating on it for months at that point, and I was more comfortable and confident with it than I was in any other team because I understood very well what that team tried to do and how to play it. If you're just mashing stuff together at first, like I said, that's kind of how I started out, but you will develop a deeper understanding of the game and I think find more success when you have a clear intent behind what it is that you're trying to do. And it's also good to set clear and healthy goals for yourself, right? Like Wolf Glick talks about this. If you go into every tournament thinking, I'm going to try to win and be the champion and nothing else can satisfy me, or you go into a GC and you're like, I have to win 2/3 of my games or else. Pokemon is a really hard game. There's a lot of variance in the game. It's a very complicated game. Nobody gets those results all the time. And so you need to be, I would say, and I think Wolf Glick would say, I think this is something I've picked up from him, that it's healthier to have goals focused on learning about the game, building your understanding of it, improving as a player over time. I did go to my first major tournament wanting to at least have a positive win-loss record. I didn't successfully do that until my fourth major tournament. It took a few attempts, but I got there. I still have not made a day 2, but I've had a fun time. I've always enjoyed the experience. I've always wanted to go back, and I feel like I have learned more and improved at the game over time. And I think that's a healthy goal to set. It's a healthy intent to have, approach to take to the game overall. It should be fun to play this game. I play Pokemon because I enjoy Pokemon, because I think it's fun. Partly because I just like these silly, goofy creatures that have been, hanging out with me virtually for most of my life at this point. But I also like that there's so many different Pokemon, such a wide variety of them, so customizable, so many different kinds of effects. I haven't even gotten into some of the properties that moves have, like sound-based moves and contact moves and dance moves. You have fun exploring all those as you learn different strategies over time. But every time I have gone to a tournament, whether I got that positive win-loss record or I really didn't, I have had one or two bad results at regionals as well. I always had fun playing this game that I love and wanted to come back for more. If you don't want to come back for more, if you don't enjoy it, if you are not having fun, it may not be the game for you. And I don't say that to gatekeep. It just, it's the reality of how it is at some points. Not all things are enjoyable to all people. This is a game. I think you should ideally enjoy it. I would say ultimately competing at a high level and winning is very enjoyable for sure. I hope to do it someday, but I would say try to engage with the game in a way that is fun for you. And that is also, again, why I'm not rigid about the advice that I give to new players, for example, about building their own teams. When I was a new player, trying to build my own teams was a key part of the fun, so I ignored the standard advice and I did that. If that's how it is for you, so be it. You're not going to enjoy the game if you quit it because you're engaging with it in a way that you don't find fun, right? So ultimately, that's what's important. Finally, I have seen new players get frustrated about losing a lot, especially early on. You are going to lose a lot in Pokemon. This is something that Wolf Glick has talked about as well. He has a much deeper perspective on it than me because he's competed at the highest level and also played a lot longer than I have and lost a lot more because of that. You need a healthy mindset to losing in this game. It is a complicated game. It is a difficult game. It is a game with a lot of random chance, which you can control for to some extent, but not completely. I have seen new players get frustrated because they put a lot of work into a team. They played a GC or something. It went badly. I, too, have had GCs where my rating just tanked from early on and I couldn't seem to get it out of the hole. I've also had GCs that went very well. It is best to appreciate the journey for what it is all the way through. If you're losing a lot, you probably have a lot of opportunities to review your games, consider what you could have done differently, and try to learn from the experience. I've heard Aaron Zhang say, I think he said it in the GC stream that he did with Wolf Glick at Pokemon Headquarters, that you kind of have to learn to love losing to an extent to do well in this game. Because you're going to do a lot of it no matter what. And if it does mental damage to you every time, you're probably going to burn out. I don't know what loving losing necessarily looks like to any particular person, but I do think you have to embrace it as part of the journey. And again, try to learn from your losses and always improve over time. Wolf Glick is the best player this game has seen, and he doesn't always make day 2 at a major tournament. And he is always working on his thought process and his practice and trying to get better at this game, even when he's already the best. So that is a healthy mindset for you to have as a brand new player as well. I think that's about all I've got. Maybe I'll think of something else. Maybe someone will ask a question in the comments. Maybe this came out as a disorganized stream of consciousness mess and I'll want to redo it at some point. But like I said, I wanted to get it done quickly while we're still in September, very early in the season. And it seems like a lot of new people are interested in getting into this game. And mostly I just sought here to answer a lot of frequently asked questions that I see come up very often in the community spaces that I'm in. I guess one other resource I can plug is the VGC subreddit. You're not typically getting feedback from top players over there, but you can make posts asking questions about the game, get decent information, and there's a Discord server linked to it, which I am in, although I'm not active there, where you can talk with people in real time about team building, how to compete, how to have a better mindset about the game, whatever it might be. And I've already plugged a lot of YouTubers that I personally watch that play at a higher level than I do, but by all means subscribe to this channel too, please. I make so many videos in which I play this game and try to figure some things out as I go, so maybe we can go on a bit of a journey here together. Otherwise, let me know in the comments if you have any more questions that I missed, and I'll see what I can do with that. But that at least is my perspective as a long time, well, not that long time, but a mid-level player of a few years now. Someone who definitely doesn't feel like a new player when he goes to tournaments anymore and sees people there who are at their first or second one. That's my perspective on how to get into VGC. Happy gaming to all of you. It is a lot to pick up at first, but it's a lot of fun, and I definitely think it's worthwhile.